Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to webinar 3 of our Nature Risk Resilience Reporting webinar series that's aimed at farmers for farmers. For those that don't know me, my name's Dan. I'm one of the directors here at LandApp and really excited to wrap up our 3-part webinar series today. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping as per usual. As this is a webinar, your camera and microphone will be turned off and it will remain off for the duration of the webinar. But as usual, that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. We'd love for you to interact with us today through the Q&A function. So hopefully you can see at the bottom of your screen a Q&A icon. Please ask any questions you've got there. And myself and Swanee, who's behind the scenes, will hopefully answer those questions during our session at the end. If there's time, we will stay around after the webinar. So if you want to come off and have an actual conversation, we can allow people to come off mute, for example, happy to do so. The webinar is being recorded, as were the other ones, and they will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, hopefully by the end of the week. And everyone who registered, including yourselves, will receive a copy of that via email. And the final point is there is, as usual, a short feedback form when you leave the webinar. So that either is when we end at 5 p.m. or if you do need to leave a bit early, not a problem. Please do just take 30 seconds to answer those multiple choice questions and leave any feedback as it really helps steer the future of these webinar series. So today, as I say, is webinar 3. What I wanted to do is just go over the agenda. So the first 10 minutes or so, we're just going to recap on the last 2 webinars just to make sure people feel up to speed. And then we're going to move into the, I guess, the main element of today's session, which is looking at the future of your farm and how LandApp can help. And this is kind of in 2 broad categories. The first one is land use modeling. And what we mean by that is LandApp's got a couple of different tools that I will demonstrate on how you can plan for the future and just see what the data and the policy is trying to drive on your land. And that includes things like agroforestry and WildEdges, hopefully terms that by the end of the session you'll be familiar with, but also comparing some value points as well. And so a big part of what we do with nature risk and resilience is allow you to see the potential uplift and ecological gains that your farm or your client's farm will see through that future planning. We then got a dedicated time just to show LandApp Mobile, which is a bit of a 15-minute demo on how you can actually use your mobile phone to interact with your plans, upload photos, etc. And then, as I said, there's a dedicated question and answer session at the end. And hopefully, if everything stays on time, we'll be finished promptly at 5 p.m. So just to recap on what we've spoken about so far. So today is webinar 3 of a 3-part webinar series. I'm biased, but I think this is one of the more exciting ones. So thank you to everyone that's attended number 1 and 2. But today is really hopefully going to be a culmination of what we've learned so far, really building in that future planning and how do you start using the tool to actually bring yourself business value. So in webinar 1, we went over the mapping basics and particularly focusing on how do you build a baseline of your farm. And as a reminder, that was an understanding on LandApp of what's currently there. So we went through how to build a map of your farm, where the different field boundaries are, but also what those field boundaries were made up of. Where was grassland, where's woodland, and if possible, what type of woodland was it? Was it conifer woodland or was it broadleaf woodland? We then, from webinar 2, took that baseline data and we calculated some metrics. So we did a bit of a deep dive on the various nature risk and resilience metrics that LandApp can calculate on those baselines. We talked about things like connectivity and core to edge ratio, which is an integrated pest management metric, and habitat cover, etc. And hopefully by the end of that webinar, people left with an understanding of some of the key metrics that both LandApp are trying to drive, but also many of the retailers and the processors working with those retailers are trying to drive. Today, which is webinar 3, is going to be building on that understanding of those metrics, but really looking at how you can start to, I guess, play around with future plans to try and maximize one or more of those different metrics. So today, for example, I'm going to be trying to draw some plans about how do I improve my connectivity score, or how do I try and minimize the amount of land I take out of production, but try and maximize my integrated pest management potential. So it's really about looking at the future, really looking at how you can use those metrics to start quantifying the benefit your farm will bring, And then if there's time, we'll also see how that future plan relates to some of the existing government schemes across Wales, England, and Scotland as well. There is little QR codes on the bottom of the screen. If you missed any of the webinars, they're on our YouTube channel, and I'm sure they'll be circulated as part of the email as well that goes out once the recording's up on YouTube. So just as a reminder, why were we doing this webinar series? We've now had thousands of farmers come through Nature Risk Resilience Reporting, which is great, but at times the feedback was it felt like we were ticking a box for a supermarket, whereas actually we see this fundamentally and primarily a tool for farmers to try and benefit from the use of technology. And so the three broad categories that fit into was we wanted to empower and educate you farmers, broadening your use of the Land App platform, making sure that you feel equipped and educated on what it means and how you can use it. The second one was we wanted to demystify the metrics and data and also provide you with a bit of peace of mind. And so that was spending the time to articulate the metrics that we're reporting on so you can understand what they mean. You can understand, therefore, what the retailers and the processors see and don't see about your farm, but also how you can use them on your journey towards more sustainability. And then that final point is, as I said, we want to move from just thinking about compliance and being a tick box exercise to actually bringing you farmers commercial value where you can make informed decisions about your land that fundamentally helps either your bottom line or reduces your flood risk or opens up opportunities for other markets, whether they're public or private markets that are upcoming as well. And how we're doing all of that is through the Land Apps. As a reminder, as a mapping tool, we're here to put the right data in the hands of the right people. We hopefully provide you with a way of connecting. So I demonstrated, I think, during webinar 1, the collaboration functions, how you can add your advisor and your potential, stakeholders. And ultimately, we want to help you make a decision. So just to reiterate, and this is a really important point for today's webinar, Land App is never going to make the decision for you. We are not advisors. We don't know your farm as well as you do. But what we can do is we can provide you with data, with data overlays, and we can analyze your farm boundary, etc., to help you make a more informed decision. But it's really worth caveating that if you're unsure and you really need help making decisions, we still would really strongly recommend you getting in touch with an advisor. And if you do need help getting in touch with an advisor, please do reach out. We've got a network of really great individuals all over the country that can help you make decisions. So if advice is what you're lacking, please do get in touch. What we're showing today definitely shouldn't constitute advice, but it helps you go some way to identifying where those decisions need to be made. And as I mentioned before, we're all, from a data perspective, your data is your own data, and we will protect your data and make it very clear on how that data is being used. And that's accordance with the farm data principles, which we've been signed up for a year or two now. So as a reminder, just as the building blocks for what we're doing today, but by now, all of you should be at least familiar with what a baseline habitat assessment is. We created one during episode 1 and we analysed it during webinar 2. Today, we're going to be building on that baseline habitat assessment. But just as a recap, the baseline habitat assessment is a digital version of your farm that shows where your existing boundaries are. So what is under your management or under your ownership, and what are the physical assets that make up that boundary. So where's the woodland, where's the arable fields, where's the grassland, etc. And all of that is underpinned by the UK Habitat Assessment. That data then within Land App allows you to generate farm level reports, which we call farm metrics, which calculate a suite of different scores across the farm based on that baseline habitat assessment. So that includes, percentage of your farm that's dedicated to habitat, how well connected that habitat is, and what proportion, for example, of your farm is using winter cover, etc., etc. As part of that webinar 2, just to reiterate, the metrics on the left, or when we're in Land App, ones on the top, which are these kind of habitat health metrics, are fundamentally in the control of you as a farmer. You have the ability to change them. You have the ability to, build plans that maximize them. And we really want to empower you as a tool to consider 1 or 2 of those metrics that you really care about and help you build plans and hopefully implement those plans as well to see them increase. The scores on the right, which we also provide, which include like water metrics and landscape context, are things that we're aware that you can't change yourself. that's part of a bigger picture, but they're important metrics for you to know. You being in a flood zone, for example, you can't change, but you can build plans to ensure that you're minimizing the risk from that flood zone. Similarly, the condition of your local river. Yes, to a point, you may be contributing to positively or negatively to that, but it is a bigger picture catchment-based approach that's going to be required that involves a number of different sectors, not just agriculture, and we all know that. But we do want to give you as much transparency on the metrics as possible. We just need to make it clear that which ones you can at least drive versus the ones that perhaps are bigger than the individual. Okay, so now thinking about future planning. So in essence, I'll be using the words land management plan to kind of articulate the future vision for your farm. And so within Land App, we have this template, which I'll be showing in a minute, called the land management plan, which in essence is a similar template to the baseline habitat assessment that allows you to draw a future view of your farm. It's really worth saying that future view is basically a picture of all the different things that could change that you are either interested in changing, or perhaps the data is suggesting where areas could be changed. But it has no, I guess, fixed timelines for when it should be delivered. So this could be your farm in 1 year, it could be your farm in 5 years, or it could be your farm in 30 years. The other thing worth saying, it is a non-committal future vision of your farm. Only the people you share it with will even see the scores that are generated from it, but there's no expectation from anyone that we're partnering with that you are therefore committing that you're going to do it. So see it as a way of articulating the art of the possible without you signing on a dotted line that you're definitely going to be planting that woodland or doing that arable reversion. It's more a way of you articulating on a map different ideas you've got. And the way that we do that is and I will show you, we will provide you with the skills to be able to map basically the physical assets that are changing. And what I mean by that, and the image is showing, is we've already got a baseline habitat map. We already know what your farm looks like. What we don't know are the ideas that you've got in your head. Where are you interested in planting a new hedgerow or creating a new pond or trying a different cover crop or planting a new woodland block? And it's very much this land management plan that gives you a space to doodle those ideas on. And that's what this is showing. And I'll actually demonstrate this in a minute. And just to reiterate, you don't need to map the things that aren't changing. If this field is staying as grass and you're managing it exactly the same, it doesn't need to be on your land management plan. All the software needs to know, and it's easier to maintain, is what's currently there, which is your baseline, and what is your future plan. Where are the areas that you're seeing change? And I'll demonstrate that in a moment. The reason we do that is that then gives us kind of a way of quantifying uplift. So earlier when we showed the farm level report, we just had your baseline value. We just had a value saying how much your current habitat cover is. But by drawing a land management plan, which we're going to do together today, you also get these uplift values. These values represent the what if. What if all of the things on my land management plan became a reality? I did plant that woodland, I did create that pond, I did introduce that beetle bank through the middle of my arable field. What does that actually do to my baseline score? And that's reflected as a absolute land management plan value. And apologies, it's quite small. I'll get it up on a bigger screen in a moment. But for example, for my connectedness in this example, my baseline value is 33%. My future value, or my land management plan value, is 40%. And that means I'm seeing a net increase of connectivity of 6.4%. And so what we want to see is this incremental change, where this is probably the maximum score that you are currently aiming for. But over time, we want to see your baseline move towards that score. And that could be 1 year you've introduced that one pond, the next year you've managed to get some funding for woodland creation, the next year you've got your hedgerow planting. So over time, what we're hoping to see is that there's a continuous improvement across a number of farms, whether you're going from 0 to 5% or 5% to 20%, we want to help every farmer move up and improve. And it's not about saying that this farm's doing really well and this one's not. It's about how do we encourage everyone to build better and raise that baseline. So uplift is just that difference between what the future state is and what the baseline is. And to do this, we know you're not ecologists. We know you're very busy doing other things, and fundamentally as farmers, you're primarily there to grow food. But what we've done is we provide a number of different tools that I'll be demonstrating some of in a moment that can help at least, I guess, stimulate ideas. And so This is basically where is the science, so the topography, your soil type, different data layers we've got around weather conditions, for example, suggesting where habitats may support your farm. And similarly, where is policy as well trying to drive change? So, for example, for those farmers in England, we have got an England Woodland Creation Offer tool that basically shows you all the different parts of your farm that's eligible for woodland planting under the England Woodland Creation Offer, but also which one's going to pay you the most. And that's based on how well connected it is, what proportion of it is protecting certain watercourses, etc. And so all of this data, this is just underpinned by various different organizations. So this is LandApp trying to digest what is and can feel quite overwhelming into kind of map-based targeting areas. And that's why we call them land use suggestions. We're not here saying you need to implement all of those wetlandscapes or all of the woodland, but we provide you with a nice map that allows you to look at each of them in turn and start to quantify their impact. It's worth saying as of today, for everything from webinar 1 and webinar 2 has been completely free for anyone to use, and it's by and large the same for today. However, just for transparency, anytime that there's this yellow tag, as it is for this slope identifier here, you do require a subscription. And just to reiterate, every farmer is entitled to use the free software to get through, but there are certain elements that we have put in a subscription that ultimately keep the lights on within LandApp that we hope bring you more value as a customer. And so that includes the slope identifier, and it does include the LandApp mobile, which I'll be demonstrating a bit later. So, for example, during today's session, just to give you a flavor, I will be just demonstrating how LandApp can quite quickly, for this farm, help you understand your soil and water and help you start to build a bit of a plan on how you can protect it. And so that might include looking at your different soil type, where there's different flood zones or water moving across your land, and suggesting, based on that data, where you may want to consider putting in different interventions. So yeah, in a moment, I will get this map up. It's quite a nice heat map showing where all the different water's flowing. And when you overlay it with, say, the soil type and the contour lines, you can start to see where that water might be collecting. So that's just a bit of a flavor of what we're going to be looking at in a moment. Okay, I think I'm going to save the mobile app for now, and I'm going to do a bit of a live demonstration of what I've just said to kind of bring it to life. So as a reminder, this was the map we finished webinar 2 having created. So we had got a baseline habitat, we had looked at where all the different tree and woodland blocks were, and we had at least kind of dotted around the farm to make sure we're happy with the baseline habitat. What's it currently saying what it is? If you click on a shape on the right-hand side, it says the name of the habitat code. What I wanted to show you just very quickly is what good looks like. So the first 5 minutes is going to be a bit of a Blue Peter moment, is what we're trying to get to. And then I'll spend the rest of the time actually showing you how I got there. So for the future planning, I did a number of different things for this farm. So for example, I've ran the slope identifier to basically start to identify where on my farm is there, I guess, severe slopes, high risk areas, and particularly when you overlay that with your baseline habitat, you can start to see which parts of your farm are perhaps more at risk from slopes. So the darker the color, the steeper the flow. The other thing that I was doing when I was building a management plan is there's a couple of different data layers that are worth me looking at. One of my favorites is the water category. Highly recommend everyone look in the water category. And there's lots of different things in here. Boreholes are important to have a think about. What else did I look at? Probable overland flows. So if I just turn that one on. This is a natural England data layer that shows you where the different areas of kind of water might be flowing across your fields. So I've got this field here that's got quite a low slope category, but there is water definitely heading down into this building and down from east to west. And again, when you combine it with the slope identifier, you can start to see where on the farm perhaps certain elements of water may need to be protected. And similarly, the risk of flooding from surface water as well was another one that I was looking at. I think as part of my management plan, I turned on it and I was just looking here, which is there's this water flow that's heading down in towards the buildings here. So when I was thinking about a management plan, I was looking first and foremost, where is water currently on my farm? where is it going from, say, productive land? Is there any decisions I can make to try and mitigate the risk of that productive land? Or, which is perhaps even more pressing, are there any of our buildings or infrastructure that my farm could be protecting my own assets from, or even my neighbour's assets as well? So having a look at those water layers is really important. The other data layer, which I'd always recommend looking at, and this was only released about 6 weeks ago, Cranfield in the Land IS program has released a England and Wales only quite detailed soil map of the country. And why this is exciting is not only does this hopefully provide you with some insight you already know, like what type of soil are we working with. Actually, let me just put my boundary on so you can see where we sit. Put it on here. But it also has quite a few different attributes within that help infer the types of kind of habitat we may want to consider generating. So, for example, this is well drained. It's got acidic, sandy soils. It's freely draining, so maybe runoff risk is less of a concern. But we want to think about how we're attenuating and how we're trying to encourage more water to perhaps go through the soil in certain areas. But it also tells you the types of crops and habitats that might be best placed or will naturally form on that soil type. So this is kind of neutral and acidic grasslands, deciduous woodlands, and then bracken and gorse if it's in the uplands as well. So there's some really nice information that's available for free now. And there's also a full soil guide as well. So even just coming on and looking at what Cranfield believes your soil type is and what that means in terms of management is a really nice step to take. And there's lots of other ones on there, but just in the names of time, they're the main ones that I'd just like to consider for my first land management plan. And so what that allowed me to do is basically, if I turn on this LMP demo, is it allowed me to create this future plan. And again, like I said, this is a Blue Peter moment. This is what I did earlier. We're going to together work it through. But it allowed me to basically run a couple of the land use suggestion tools and doodle on the map areas of the farm that, in this hypothetical example, I want to see changed on the ground. So there's some light touch ones, like my woodland is quite closed canopy at the moment. And I was just, considering maybe putting a woodland glade through and maybe thinking about, a felling license and start, considering that. Again, please seek advice for anything that you're unsure of. But considering, a woodland glade, also considering a new woodland block. So I had a little look at the England woodland creation outputs, which again, I'll show you how to run in a moment, particularly just looking at which ones are high value. And I realized that a lot of my farm in this example is a high value. And this particular block can generate per hectare, per hectare, £839 per hectare, or in total for this whole block, £6,900 per year. So again, I was just basically playing around with, okay, there's a bit of woodland I want to extend. How do I then get that onto a land management plan? And what would that look like if I were to do it? And that included also just measuring up some deer fencing. So once I had doodled up my woodland block, how much deer fencing may I need? Would I want to put it all the way around the outside? Would I just want to put it around one edge? And then similarly to that, I mentioned earlier those buildings which had that flood layer going through it. Risk of flooding, I think was the one. This one, yeah, I know this farm fairly well. I know there's potential risk of water heading south to north towards the buildings. Why wouldn't I consider perhaps, increasing the vegetation cover or even creating a bit of a pond or a wet woodland in this area just to try and hold a bit more of the water if there's a month of lots of rain. So that was just an example of a land management plan. And that's basically the doodle pad that is the land management plan template. I mean, I don't unfortunately own this farm, but you can see the types of interventions that you draw on your land management plan, where they might sit. It's not 100% cover. So what I mean by that is, remember, we've still got this baseline. So toggling between these two, it's quite a nice way of seeing what things might change. Where are we adding? I don't know if Julius is on the call, for example, but his question last week was, what would it mean to my integrated pest management if I did put in some beetle banks? And so on my land management plan, I just added those beetle banks into that design. And therefore, they're just those things that I might increase my scores with. And that land management plan, then, just to finish off this kind of walkthrough demo before we actually build one together, is then reflected in my nature reporting scores. So just to show you then my habitat cover, if I were to implement this hypothetical plan, goes from 31% to 42%, which is an increase of 11%. My connectivity or my connectedness goes from 33% to 40%, which is the bit I just demonstrated, a 6% increase. And my cropland supported by beneficial habitats, i.e. that integrated pest management potential, is slowly getting close to 100%. We've gone from 75 to 87. And it's that type of planning and kind of quantification that hopefully, I guess, inspires you that you're heading in the right direction, particularly if you're just trying to maximize one or two of these scores. Draw it on a land management plan and push it through. Worth saying, and I will demonstrate this at the end, if you've drawn a land management plan, you just need to make sure that the land management plan is selected within your submission. And so that's in the farm info page. So I will show that as part of my demo, but how I've got there is once you've got a land management plan, you do need to share it through your nature reporting submission, because that will then calculate those uplift scores for you. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview on the land management plan element. So what I'm going to do is now show you how, if we're starting just from the baseline habitat assessment, how did I get a land management plan? How do you start creating that future vision for your farm? So I'll be changing between the different base maps. I will hide this for now. And basically the position that we're all in is we've all hopefully got a habitat baseline. Okay, so I guess the first thing to say is you need to create a land management plan within LandApp. And there's a number of different ways you can do that. What I find the easiest is just to choose a field, like one field that you've got an idea for. So hypothetically, let's just say I've lived at this farm for a number of years and I've always wanted to create a pond in this field. And so this could be the first action. And to create a land management plan, you can right click on that particular field. You can hit copy to plan, and you want to create a new plan. As a reminder, you only need to do this once. You just need one land management plan. We can create multiple. So this could be my demo version 2. And you just need to make sure that you're choosing the land management plan template, because that will give me all the different codes that are available in that UK HAB. So this is the first basic version, is I've basically just told LandApp that I'm focusing my attention to start with just on this one field. I'm then going to just draw that pond that I've always wanted to create. And again, there's a number of different ways you can do this, and we've got lots of guidance. I'll show you two. The first one is you can basically just split out from the edge of the field where that pond would go if it's touching an edge. And what I mean by that is you can right click, hold split, and then you can basically hold shift and basically carve out a corner of the field that you perhaps want to put into a pond. And actually, I'm going to turn this into a wetland scrape, because they're quite nice. So what I've done is I've just carved out from the edge of the polygon where I've always wanted that pond. Or just to show you and demonstrate, rather than drawing from the edge, you can just free draw in the middle of the field as well. So it could be that you want to create a pond in the middle of this field, hypothetically. But what you want to do is hit the draw button at the top, choose the shape you want. So you could choose circle if you want a perfect pond, but I don't think anyone wants a perfect pond. So I'm going to choose area. I hold shift on my keyboard. And while holding shift, I can now draw a shape of a pond like so, and hit finish. Again, you can assign that to whatever code you want. I'll do a non-priority habitat pond, for example, and I can put that little code on as well. So I've basically drawn, just on the LandApp, the ideas before even looking at any data layers, what's always been in my head. Where do I want that hedgerow? Where do I want that pond? Where have I always wanted to draw something? As a reminder, if the grassland's not changing, you can delete that from the land management plan. So you can hit delete, i.e. the only thing that's changing is I'm adding 2 ponds. The baseline is still continuing. Okay. And that's similar to a hedgerow as well. So say I wanted to plant a hedgerow down this polygon, make sure your land management plan is selected, draw a line, and it can also trace the outside. So we can do a hedge from there, draw a little line, and I can assign that to a hedgerow. I can put on the length, and I can put on the code name as well. Again, so if I turn off the baseline, my land management plan, at the moment, it's got 2 ponds on it, one on the edge and one in the middle, and just the length of hedgerow. So I'm now starting to, I guess, put on paper the different ideas that I've got for the farm. like I said, there might be some areas that you want to use some data layers to inspire you on what could change. So just a couple of favorites. Yeah, a good one is always the water. There's a couple of other ones like pooling, risk of ponding, for example, and where that one actually has got anything on here outside of ownership. Let's put back on that overland flows again. So like my ponding, actually this is quite interesting. So where I drew the random in the field pond, the data is actually suggesting, and I might just put on the risk of flooding as well. The data is suggesting that a lot more of the water is moving through this part of the field. So yeah, so you can see actually the line is coming over here. So maybe this isn't the best place to put a pond, but providing it's in my ownership, which these fields are, I can actually just move this pond that I've just drawn by using the move feature icon. So I can basically pick up that pond and I can then move it to here. So it might be that the pond I want to create is just taking over one of these paddocks. Obviously you can edit it and amend it, but I've just used that move feature. And now basically I put a pond on where I know I've got overland flow. And again, that's going to be reducing the risk of downstream flooding. So that's just an example of using a data layer to inform where that element goes. Another one, but this one I'm just going to show you is on the subscription tier, but just as a little teaser, we have got what's called the historical data from Ordnance Survey circa 1900. And so this is the data set, which basically Ordnance Survey and a team of God knows how many surveyors surveyed the whole of the country back in 1900. And what this shows really nicely is the location of old woodlands. So where historically were woodlands, but also the shape of field parcels historically as well. So if I put on my baseline, you can see through the different farm areas that actually this farm, and I was looking at this earlier, I think it's actually got slightly more woodland than there was there in 1900. So you can see that 1900, this block of woodland was there. But actually this block that the family have basically established over here was not present in 1900, nor were these ones. So you can have a look at the 1900 maps, and there might be certain habitats that are missing, that if you just toggle on and off these areas, that might be worth considering restating. But actually looking at this farm, and just wanted to show you, like a lot of the historical woodland is there, but actually there's more woodland cover than there was in 1900. And that isn't always the case. And it's definitely worth having a little look and a play with those types of data set to see if there's either old field boundaries you can instate. So that might be this one, for example. This field could be made, split it with a hedge. But it's quite nice to have a little look about what the farm looked like back then. And again, you can just draw those on the map. You can kind of trace around the outside of those features as well, just to kind of inspire that baseline, inspire that land management plan, sorry. So what I want to show you now is these land use suggestions. So I mentioned in the slides that there's a couple of different ways that LandApp can generate suggestions based on your farm. Some of these are only available in England, and some of them are available GB. So it's worth having a play. I guess the easiest way to tell and access them is you firstly need if you're in England, you need an SBI number for some of them. So I've just copied it. And obviously where there's requested an SBI number, unfortunately, they don't work in Wales and Scotland yet, although we are still working behind the scenes to try and get better accessibility to those data sets. But all of our land use suggestions fall under this new plan button at the top. And within this new plan, we've got this download data section, which is where you can buy Ordnance Survey data, you can generate a habitat baseline, or you can get land use insights. And what this does, by clicking on it, it opens up this little side panel, like a little catalog of all the different things that you can run. So, for example, I mentioned wetlandscapes earlier. You could run that by clicking on it, choosing your reference plan. So you just need to choose one that shows your whole farm, give it a name like demo, and paste in your SBI number and hit download. And what this does is this just takes your field boundaries and it will start processing, in this case, all the various wetlandscapes that can be produced. And what we mean by that is just where is your soil type well placed to perhaps hold more water, or where are there overland flows that you could perhaps consider thinking about things like a leaky woody dam. And we've got lots of different guidance points on there. Just in the name of time, I won't run all of these, but do have a little look down the data layer. I guess some to highlight, and I will actually run agroforestry in a moment. But yeah, the slope identifier I've already shown you. We've got a really nice integration with the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and that's called ePlanner, and that shows you where pollinator mixes might be best placed on your farm, or where woodland is, I guess, looking ecologically speaking, is best placed. Obviously, even UK CEH hasn't walked your farm, sure. So obviously, please speak to an advisor if there's any questions. But what I wanted to do is I'm just going to run an agroforestry design just to show you an example output from our agroforestry design. And again, we've got guidance on this on our website, but I just wanted to kind of flash up on the screen how the agroforestry design works. So the first thing to say is you need to choose a field or multiple fields that you want to put through the agroforestry design. So just for the name, just for the demo, what I'm going to choose is just one of these grassland fields and one of these grassland fields, and also one of the arable fields that I've got showing at the moment. So basically, the way that I would do this, and again, this is in the guidance, is you just need to create an area of interest, like which fields do you actually want to run. So as before, I'm just going to create a new agroforestry area of interest. Excuse the acronyms. And now what I can do is for those two fields, I can run that agroforestry design. So I'm going to download data. I'm going to find my agroforestry. And for the demo, I'm going to just do a linear design. There are 3 different design types that you can choose from, and there's a bit of an information icon on each of them. But I'm going to do the agroforestry linear design. I'm going to choose my agroforestry area of interest, give it a name. SBI number is optional in here, so this one works across GB. Why I want to plant agroforestry. Again, hopefully this is, we've got a webinar on the actual agroforestry tool, but I'm just going to run it as a demo. Tree row orientation, I'll let it do automatic, single, additional path, download. So this is just me whistling through the agroforestry design, just so you can see a bit of an output. It takes between a minute and 30 seconds to run. You will receive an email once it's complete. So it is worth keeping an eye on your inbox, or just if you're waiting for something in particular, you can go do something else and wait for the notification. But in essence, what I'm hoping for in 30 seconds is a bit of an overview of how agroforestry could look in these 2 fields. And in essence, what it's looking at is things like terrain. So what I mean by terrain is we've got contour lines, which you can access within the land app. It's like, which way is the hills sloping? Because your agroforestry design can take that into account. But it's also thinking about water. It's also thinking about wind protection. It's also thinking about why you wanted to plant things. So by answering, you want to put livestock in it, will be a different structure to maybe you want to arable crop it, for example. I'm hoping. Refresh my screen. There we are. Great. So I don't know what this area is. Let's delete that. So what it's produced for me is a little agroforestry design. So again, just to kind of demonstrate, this is the example I gave. So it's got 12-meter gaps. It's suggested how many trees per row and what type of tree I want to produce. So you can see all these different areas. Plus, it's kept a 12-meter buffer around the outside. So for my design, it's suggesting I'm going kind of this northwesterly to southeasterly. And all of that is just a nice, quite detailed design for your land management plan. If you're happy with it, obviously, just in the name of time, I'm going to bring it all over into my land management plan, but you can edit it. You can change the orientation. You can obviously rerun the tool a couple of times to try and find one that you like. But just for the sake of time, I'm just going to show you how I can take that linear design and move it into my land management plan. One really good bit of practice that I've done up here that I'm just going to show you is you can create folders. And if I call this folder agroforestry, like so, I can put in my linear designs, etc. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm just going to turn these ones off. So the final step is I want to select all of my kind of tree rows because that's what the land management plan needs. I'm going to then copy all of those tree rows and bring them into my land management plan, which looks like this, like so. And then from here, I'm going to basically just ensure that all of these different tree rows are at least given a UK HAB code. Depending on what trees you're choosing to plant, obviously will impact it, but I'm just going to go for some generic broadleaf woodlands, like so. And therefore, in my land management plan, I've got these 2 blocks of agroforestry that have been mapped on my farm. The final thing I want to show you before quickly bringing up Land App Mobile is I can now update my scores with this new land management plan I've made. So rather than running that initial one, I just want to repoint my scoring to my updated land management plan. And in a couple of minutes, I'll get updated scores as well. So let's see if this one improves or reduces from, say, a 6% uplift in connectivity, for example. Okay, so the final thing I wanted to show you is Land App Mobile. And I'm just going to pause my sharing for a moment and get it set up. I'm just going to connect to my phone. And I'm then going to resume. So on the right-hand side, just to kind of show you what I've done, is on the right-hand side, if I've logged into Land App Mobile, and I've also loaded or downloaded, sorry, the map that I've just generated. So just to show you, if I go back on this, all of the different plans that I've got in my map here, and I'm feeling my internet struggling, so I'm going to turn off my camera for a moment. I've got all the different plans that I've just created, including that land management plan that I generated earlier. So I'm just going to refresh because that looks like it's not. Let's see if that's come through now. 17 plans. There we go. So I got this land management plan demo, which is the one that I just created earlier. And by clicking on that, what this now does is on my Land App Mobile, you can see all the different things that I've designed. So for example, when I mentioned earlier, the beetle banks, which is on this plan, I can basically in the field go and ground truth these different elements. So I could go to my beetle banks and actually take my phone to the exact location of that particular beetle bank, and I can amend them as well. So what that means is I can draw on them, I can split them on Land App Mobile, I can change the shape of them, I can change the attributes of them, etc., etc. And that automatically syncs then to my desktop. So for example, if I just for demonstration change this to grassland, just the bottom section of that, what that does is that then syncs to Land App, and you can see it's now updated. And there's a number of different things you can do on Land App Mobile. Obviously, you don't have time to go through them all. But other than editing your plans and visualizing your land management plans out in the field, you can also upload photos. So you'll probably have noticed that when I was looking at this plan itself, there was a number of different photos that were showing. And these are all photos that earlier, again, Blue Peter fashion, that I had uploaded from walking around the farm. So I can not only see them on my Land App Mobile, so I can have a little look at them, have a little look where they sit. They also sit within my Land App desktop as well. So again, I can upload them from my phone and have a look. I don't know exactly where this photo was, but upload photos from my farm directly onto my desktop, and they start to be, act as evidence for the plan that I'm making or the baselining that I've done. If an ecologist wants to help you identify a grassland, getting Land App Mobile and taking a photo of that grassland is a really nice way of storing the evidence for that particular scheme. Okay, so yeah, that's just a very whistle-stop tour of Land App Mobile. I apologize because I overran a little bit on my tools, but it's a really nice companion. You can look at your different parcels. You can have a little look at your, the different elements that you've created, and that provides you with a really nice way of editing while you're out in the field in a way that's live. It's also worth saying that this works offline. We know many of you are out in areas where perhaps there's not enough signal, and so you can download your maps offline and they will resync once you've gone back online as well. So you can, have multiple people going out, ground truthing the different fields. And there's a direct sync between this map on the left, which is my desktop. You can see it's syncing, and the one that's on the right, which is the Land App Mobile. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff. So there we are. I just updated it to Cropland, and you can see that split's now happened in Land App Mobile. Okay, hope that gives you a nice flavor. So just to recap before I come to the questions, what do we expect from a land management plan? We expect really just a future vision of what could be on the ground. So in this example, I've got, some example agroforestry. I've made some hypothetical ponds. And then this plan, which is the one I did earlier, I spent a bit more time running WildEdges, etc. But I've also got areas like wet woodlands, etc. They're all future visions. They don't have any commitment, but they really help us calculate that uplift. And I'll get the stats up in a minute once it's ran, but I will come to questions in the meantime. Thanks for listening. Okay, so first question from Kate. Thanks, Kate. How easy is it to convert my future plan into an actual application like SFI? Yeah, that's a really nice question, and actually it was on my agenda. I just didn't really have time to get to it. So I will quickly show you now, Kate. So let's just, for example, look at the agroforestry, because I think that's a really nice live example. And again, the need to, how to translate this agroforestry into, say, SFI is a really nice thing that we can do together. So as a reminder, we've kind of done the agroforestry design. So this is a map of the, I guess, existing asset or the future asset that I want to create. So in this case, it's just a linear set of trees going through the middle of my field. What you want to do is you first need to create an SFI plan. And I did on the last webinar quickly show this. But for example, I could just bring this one field onto, as I did for the land management plan, just onto the SFI template. So let's just go. And this works, by the way, for Welsh habitat schemes and the agri-climate scheme in Scotland. But just to show you for the SFI, bring a new plan on. I've got my agroforestry design. What you need to do then is just double check the guidance. So with agroforestry, in SFI, you've got this maintain very low density of in-field agroforestry trees or so. That is then, I've just taken this whole field and I put it into agroforestry, because the level of detail that in this case the SFI needs is, yes, they need a supporting map showing where the agroforestry is, which is this one. But the application payment, providing you meet the guidance, can be at the field level. So it's the whole field that goes in. You just need to make sure you're meeting the density of trees that they're asking for here. So I can't remember exactly what it says, but you basically, it's as simple as what I've just done. It's copy that whole field from your initial import and apply it to a particular scheme. So in this case, if I were to go into SFI for agroforestry for low density in-field trees, this whole field would be worth £1,500 per year as part of that application. That then has, obviously this is just a very basic application, but we've got at least a table view of what option I'm putting in, which field number it's in, how much I'm getting paid, etc., that you can export, and it's that you need for your application. So there's a couple of steps, but all the information's there, and you can play around with the different templates to get the guidance that you may need. I think we've had this question. So yeah, mobile evidence app work offline. So yeah, basically the way it works, just in terms of the Land App Mobile, is when you use the software, and I've realized my camera's off still. I'm hoping, let's try it back on. When you use the software, the mobile app forces you to download a version of that map. And the reason for that is if the signal goes patchy or if you completely go offline, you can still work. And then as soon as you've got signal, or you come back off airplane mode, for example, it then resyncs. And we've built, so basically within it, a conflict resolution. So we actually tested it with the Land App team. I think we had about 15 of us out down in Surrey last week, all editing the same map. Some of us offline, some of us not. And it was quite interesting that the app could handle multiple people editing different plans. It definitely worked well offline. And it basically just pushes all the data back up and does a conflict resolution on timings of when if there's two people editing the same feature, it has a conflict resolution with a little message up that says, do you want to accept these changes? But yeah, have a play. But if it's just one or two of you going out, which a large proportion of it is, it's plain sailing. So can farm question for anonymous. Can farm staff or contractors log into the app and take photos and upload evidence on my behalf, or is it tied to a single user account? Yeah, that's a nice question. So basically, you as a farmer own your data. So once you've got a map that looks like this, you can choose to add people to it. So you could add, in this case, I've got Will and Ben as part of my collaboration. So they could come into the map. And on the free version, they will be able to just view and view and scroll and turn on the different data layers. If they're on a subscription, if you're on a subscription, you can invite free users in that can come and collaborate with you. As a reminder, if you want them using Land App Mobile, they do need to be on a subscription. But that idea of collaboration, you can add whoever you want to the map, and they can either contribute in like a editor capacity, which includes like uploading photos, or they can contribute just as a viewer. They might want to just have a look at your plan. Where are you planning to put agroforestry? Adding to them to this map and pointing them to this particular feature is a really nice way of doing that. And so much so, and this is a bit of a hidden feature, if I wanted to share on an email this particular agroforestry design, I can actually click this copy link. And so rather than saying, come into my map and find the right plan, if you hit copy link here, the URL is specific for that agroforestry design. So providing I've got access to that map and hit enter, not only do I come into the Land app and log in, it also should zoom me into my agroforestry design. This is testing my internet. Hopefully. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So you can see I've shared the link. So rather than saying come in to look at my whole maps, you can share a specific part of your map as well. And that could be to a friend or a family member or an advisor. I've built this land management plan. Can you come have a look at this particular bit? Yeah, getting that link is really useful. Another question, can I model multiple different scenarios at the same time on Land App, i.e. one plan for agroforestry and one for another reason, such as rewilding? Or can I only have one active future plan? Yeah, it's a really good question. So as it stands today, on your map, which is this interface you can see at the moment, you can have as many as you want. So I got LMP1 and I've got LMP2. So there's two different versions of this same plan. And there's obviously some conflict. You can push both of those land management plans to, it's because I'm on the wrong link. You can push both of those plans to your nature reporting customer, but they will kind of smush them together, if that's the right phrase. It's a non-jargon phrase. So you can choose both of them. But what I would recommend is, like I did earlier, is basically submit one first. So I basically submitted one, get my scores, and then adjust it once I've got my scores to the other land management plan. So yeah, we've not quite got a way of having two separate scenarios that have like side-by-side comparisons, but you can manually doing that by sharing one, waiting for the metrics to be generated, getting your report, and then rerunning it with a different land management plan to get your second report. Yeah, so for example, actually the plan that we've just done is now rerun. So yeah, the one with the agroforestry design, for example, is way more than 6% uplift of connectivity. I've managed to get 14% uplift of connectivity. So that the scenario that I drew with you guys live actually has maximized connectivity more, but there's been a slight decrease in my habitat cover. My last habitat cover was up 13% or so. Yeah, we're looking at kind of iterating this report, and one of the things that I've asked for is that like timeline comparison, like how did it look like yesterday versus today, for example, because it'd be quite nice to flick between the two in a slightly more cohesive way. But yeah, we're not quite there yet. But obviously you get this data, you can obviously export it or view it or download it as a print or however you want, and then you can compare the different scenarios yourself. Okay. So does the future planning tool automatically check for conflicting rules, e.g. warning me if I feature protected habitat boundary? So that's a really good question. So for some of our templates and for our subscribers, like for stewardship and SFI, we do have that type of tool. So we have in the toolbox, we've got this Oh no, it's not. Oh, it's in the SFI 24 at the moment, isn't it? So yeah, we've just about to release the SFI 26 one. But for SFI, we have got an SFI validator, but we haven't got one at the moment for the land management plan. We do validate some things in the nature reporting bit, so it will flag an error to you here if you've got any things like overlapping polygons or where your plan is duplicated. The product team are thinking a bit more about how do we help ensure that management plan is at least not making any incorrect assumptions, or it's not any human error. But at the moment, it's very much like, what are your ideas? Get them down on a piece of paper, and then how do we quantify what that means in terms of output? So yeah, we've got this like way of designing the land management plan. We can at least tell you if you're double counting. So that's one of the main things we do avoid. But in terms of like drawing a land management plan that doesn't meet all these business rules, we're not quite there yet. So yeah, definitely worth having a play. But yeah, we can't answer all those questions right now. But hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavor of the different data layers you can use, how the metrics are then impacted, and also kind of how you can start building land management plans. Really worth saying, just to kind of to wrap up then, we pride ourselves on our customer support. If we know, I appreciate that what I've just shown, you can take a bit of time to learn. But if you are struggling, I think the first thing is please do either get in touch or visit our help center. We've got loads of guidance, we've got loads of videos, loads of obviously webinars that we record. So have a look at them, or you could just drop us a message. So there's a little message icon, or there's a contact form on our website. Please do get in touch. But I would particularly, we can ask our marketing team just to ensure these are on the emails. We do have a dedicated nature risk resilience reporting section of our help center. And this includes things about building management plans and understanding your metrics and just some general FAQs as well. So it'd be worth, if you're struggling or you just want to read a bit more about our tool, going to the help center. And yeah, we can circulate that link to everyone that's attended. Oh, Q&A. We've just done that. So yeah, it leaves me just to say thank you so much, everyone, for listening and for the great questions. This is the end of the three-part webinar series. They will be on YouTube. We are likely to do another set of 3 later on. So any feedback you can give on what would be more useful, or whether I move too quickly or too slowly, or there's other things you'd like, please do answer that in that form when you leave. But anyway, I will let everyone go off 2 minutes early. Thank you so much for your time.